Hello, and welcome to the third installment of me trying to be creative on the internet. I'm still hesitant to give a whole speech about what this channel is gonna be about. Mostly I'm just kind of dicking around at this point with books and movies, etc. However, the book videos will be kind of more focused on drawing parallels between works of literature that I found personally thrilling, written in different time periods, to see if I can conjure up anything wise and worthwhile to say regarding the various themes and morals of the stories, and how they reflect humanity and society in their own unique ways. If you like that sort of thing, please stick around, and hopefully I can deliver some type of fun and interesting message, or at the very least, get you to kind of think about some kind of things, introduce you to some concepts, some things that I think are some pretty good reads. Bear with me, my editing skills are, subpar, but they'll only get better with practice. Dating in college, or if you can't be with the one you want to be with, sleep with the roommate? At least, that's one of the philosophic takeaways from The Rules of Attraction by the dude who also wrote Less Than Zero, and perhaps most famously, American Psycho. Set in the 80s at a small liberal arts college in New England, three students, Lauren, Sean, and Paul, try to figure out their love lives during incredibly transitional times in their lives: college. The book isn't really written like a normal novel. Ellis chose to write a book in a stream of consciousness format that does less narration and more reading of the character's thoughts. Each chapter is a sort of monologue in that character's mind. The book has no actual narrative structure, just characters' thoughts and emotions flowing onto the page, directly from their brains, as if the author were typing words down as they thought them. For example, the very first line is from Lauren's perspective and goes like this. "And it's a story that might bore you, but you don't have to listen," she told me. Because she always knew it was going to be like that, and it was, she thinks, her first year, or actually a weekend, really a Friday, in September at Camden. And this was 3 or 4 years ago. She got so drunk that she ended up in bed, lost her virginity, late, she was 18, in Lorna Slavin's room, because she was a freshman and had a roommate, and Lorna was, as she remembers, a senior or a junior, and usually sometimes at her boyfriend's place off campus, to who she thought was a sophomore, ceramics major, but who was actually either some guy from NYU, a film student, and up in New Hampshire just for the get dressed to get screwed party, or a townie. That's all one sentence, right away where it's as if we're in Lauren's mind, recounting the memories right along with her. We're plunged into a world of university parties, and immediately we can imagine the scene that Lauren is talking about. After her initial monologue, we're introduced to Sean, the typical, not quite frat, but fake deep and guitar-playing, drinks too much college boy, trying to hook up with somebody at the same party, then spotting Lauren. Throughout the book, Lauren and Sean develop a relationship, even though Lauren is in love with Victor, her long-distance boyfriend studying away in Europe. The third and final main character of the book is Paul, an out bisexual who wears a lot of leather jackets and smokes a lot of cigarettes. Paul is also enamored with Sean, but he also has to deal with the sexual advances of Richard, his alcoholic friend from childhood, and his mother's indifference towards him and his sexuality. While the three main characters are caught in a love triangle, an anonymous person is writing love letters to Sean and leaving them in his locker. Talking about this book is kind of weird because on one hand, it feels like it was written for a very specific generation at a very specific time period, and yet at the same time has these insanely relatable passages. It's one of those books where there are so many understandable situations and feelings of youth that at times it feels like it was especially written for you and what you're going through right now. Without a hard and fast narrative structure to keep, Ellis is able to write this really entertaining stream of consciousness piece about romance, or the death of it, in college in the 80s that echoes the voice we listen to in our own heads. Interestingly, even with this unique structure, Ellis adds this sadder element to the plot regarding the girl writing Sean love letters that feels harrowingly real. I won't spoil it, but it is a bit intense. Some have said it's overall a comedy on the death of romance, and I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that. In the traditional sense of comedic romance in movies such as The Princess Bride, Dirty Dancing, and Moonstruck, a romance begins in a funny way, often a meet-cute. Two people run into each other, somebody accidentally knocks something out of a person's arms and apologizes profusely. You know the drill. In The Rules of Attraction, Ellis sets up the story of the meet-cute between Sean and Lauren, at least for a while. But instead of seeing the fantasy of the soulmate through, like rom-coms often do, Sean and Lauren have to deal with real-world problems. Sean's alcoholism, which he doesn't really recognize due to being so young and stubborn, social pressure and college parties, mental health of their peers, and above all, actually making it out of college mentally okay. The author plays this really dangerous game between romantic comedy and romanticization of sadness, and often comes out with the former rather than the latter. Any person currently going through undergrad who's familiar with party culture, especially in liberal arts colleges where it seems like everybody knows everybody, or at least somebody you know knows somebody else that you know, can kind of relate to it. Brent Easton Ellis has come far from being known as only one of the most prolific writers of Gen X, as he has taken several controversial stances on subjects over the last few years, including an odd anti-Trump take meant to cause reactions from liberals titled White. I am not that interested in politics. I am not that interested in policy. What I was interested in was the coverage. Especially in Hollywood, there was an immense overreaction. I don't care really about Trump that much, and I don't care about politics. I was forced to care based on how it was covered and how people have reacted. Well, he's a literary genius with several works that really did push literature and narrative boundaries, including the one I'm talking about right now. It's a shame that Ellis has seemed to be following something he won't really, let us see. The Rules of Attraction, which has an entire important subplot about negative feelings towards an American president, Ronald Reagan, and how that sentiment can overall affect a community or a nation, really contradicts his comments about not being interested in politics, as he was once, at least enough to know their influences on younger generations and write them into a pop culture novel. Ellis isn't exactly in the same tax bracket as Trump or anything, but his current statement and feelings on politics can only really reflect one of two things. Number one, he's a washed-up actor who has already caught fame and fortune, but ran out of ideas and writes to get reactionaries to pick up on his words to, keep him relevant. Or, kind of in the same vein, number two, he's an aging nihilist whose feeling is nothing matters, so let's all watch Trump fail no matter how many people or institutions he hurts, as long as he's not hurting me, who really cares? Either way, either take is incredibly boring and already washed out, and neither ever really warranted a pages-long rant about how annoying your anti-Trump friends are. It seems that he kind of just wants attention again, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. Overall, The Rules of Attraction is one of his milder books, I guess, compared to American Psycho. But it accurately depicts our habits and the way we interact with people in the years after we're not under our parents' roofs anymore. It's wild times where we suddenly have all this responsibility, and what we do with that is now more or less completely our own. That's one of those little life things that doesn't really come without us having to make mistakes. It has to, or else change would be so boring anyways. Sean, Lauren, and Paul go to college during this very, rapidly changing and unfamiliar time period during the United States. The height of the AIDS crisis, lots of drugs and drugs addiction, and political turmoil. At the same time, while dealing with the weight of the world in that sense, there are also their own little worlds of adolescence to attend to. When the world at large and a character's own converge into one, you're kind of reading a good book, because great authors know how to connect themes and motifs and relatable motivations, intentionally and obviously. It's not exactly the death of romance, it's a different take on what romance means when we're young and how much it can possibly mean. You really have to pay attention to the details in the book, though. I'm not sure everyone will kind of enjoy the writing style, but hey, I'm just the messenger. So now that we've gone through a more poetic and romanticized journey of dating in college in the Reagan 80s, that may have pulled on your heartstrings in a lot of different ways, let's go through a more economic analysis, shall we? Stay with me here. If you've been around women, and hopefully you have, but always, of course, in an appropriate manner, I'm sure you've heard the whole, there's just no good men out there. And I'm gonna throw this disclaimer out here right now. I could make an entire video about the things with that statement, but I'm not gonna do that. I started this book kind of pessimistically because, it's written by an older dude about dating lives of college kids, and not everyone can pull it off as poetically as Ellis can. But by the end, I was pretty convinced by a few of his arguments, so I wanted to invite you, people on both the woman-loving and hating spectrum ends of the internet, to give it a little bit of a chance. Written by author John Berger in 2010, and known as the Moneyball of Dating by NPC, Datanomics has a very cringy title, but its main message is this. In the United States in 2012, 34% more women than men graduated from four-year colleges. According to census data, 7 years ago there were 5.5 million college-educated women as opposed to 4.1 college-educated men in the US, or 5 women for every 3 men, assuming they all, just find each other after graduation or whatever. In 2016-2017, women received 57% of the college degrees given out, and have been outnumbering men in colleges since 2000. Not that this means we're earning more money or anything, but, whatever. He argues that this lopsided ratio, as well as more opportunities for men to work blue-collar jobs than women as they graduate high school, has led to the hookup culture present in college nowadays, as well as less incentive for women or men to settle down. Namely, he believes it's the reason that young men are not as inclined as their previous generational counterparts to commit to women, at least in a traditional marriage sense, during and after college, leading to kind of problems for heterosexual women who do want to get married or settle down on the younger side. Therefore, the phrase, "there are no good men," in context might just be, "there are no men." He uses the vernacular, it's not that he's just not that into you, it's just that there's not enough. Berger uses a lot of interesting demographic examples to prove his point. In Southern California and Silicon Valley, there are 38% more single men than single women in their 20s, and 48% more in their 30s, 3 men for every woman. And in 2010, 10% of them were millionaire coding engineers. Apparently that led to men trying a bit harder to date, due to there being less women and women feeling more comfortable. Other places with a surplus of eligible bachelors were Alaska, Nevada, and Utah, all big oil production industry hubs, which coincides with his blue-collar theory. On the other hand, New York City's college dating scene is completely the opposite. The Big Apple has 100,000 more college-educated women than men. In the words of Queens College sociology professor Andrew Beveridge, a market that just won't clear, with new freshmen each year. In the 20 to 29 age range, there are 2.3 women for every 1 man in Murray Hill alone. Berger's book is full of personal interviews and well-thought-out research into a topic that still hasn't had a lot of work done on it yet. He's also pretty aware of the dangers of talking about people purely in an economic sense, and seems to navigate this without a lot of issues, pointing out that the book shouldn't be used as pure dating advice or an excuse to move across the country. So there are more and more female college graduates every year, in social hubs like New York City and other college cities, but more rural areas like UNC in North Carolina, which had 50% more women than men in 2010, as well as a large part of New England. All of these factors have led to the hookup culture we see today, and more specifically, the reason we see college-aged men not willing to commit to women. It's mostly for a heterosexual audience, and mainly directed at women as an attempt to explain the college dating scene and why it can seem so frustrating. I'm thinking that compared to what we saw with Sean Bateman in The Rules of Attraction, there might be some truth to his argument. There are a few interesting chapters on the role of religious practice, race, and social maturity levels in the book, and how those type of things can play into the young dating scenes these days as well. Overall, the book's an interesting and easy-to-digest economic take on dating, even if it is a little cringy to read at times. Again, take the hot take how you will. It's a bit more economically driven than any conversation maybe should be about dating in college. But hey, what do I know? It's not like I have a degree in economics, not for another few months anyway. That's the end of this video. If you enjoyed this comparison, throw me a like or a subscription or something if it pleases you. I'm Abby. Thank you for watching this video about dating in college, and I'll see you next time.